Officials now say they've identified a suspect vehicle tied to a pair of ballot drop box fires in Portland, Oregon. Authorities are investigating the very disturbing incidents as well as another blaze at a drop box in neighboring Washington state. I want to bring in CNN's Sarah Murray. She's working the story for us. So what are you learning, Sarah?
Well, Wolf, obviously this is very disturbing. We don't yet know what the motivations are behind this, but officials are saying that there appear to be 3 different instances that are linked. The ones that we're hearing about today that took place in Oregon as well as Washington, and one that took place earlier this month in Washington state where there was an incendiary device that was somehow attached to these ballot drop boxes and caused, these kinds of videos that we're seeing here, these flames and ballots burning. In Oregon, they said it was just 3 ballots that were impacted and that they've reached out to the people who were impacted. And in Washington state, though, they said there are hundreds. And so they're basically telling people, if you cast your ballot over the weekend in this drop box, to check the ballot tracker online. These are both states that conduct their elections predominantly by mail. And of course, in Washington, we have seen this very hotly contested congressional race. And Congresswoman Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez put out a statement. She's one of the candidates, of course, in this hotly contested race, saying, "I'm requesting an overnight law enforcement presence be posted at all ballot drop boxes in Clark County through Election Day. Southwest Washington cannot risk a single vote being lost to arson and political violence." And Wolf, these drop boxes, again, we don't know the exact motivation behind these efforts, but they have just become targets for misinformation, claims from the right that there is rampant voter fraud. That hasn't been proven out, but we have seen the Department of Homeland Security warn that these kind of drop boxes are targets for domestic violent extremists. So, we'll wait to see. Officials are investigating locally. The FBI is investigating. We'll see what comes of those investigations.
Yeah, I'm sure the story is going to continue.
All right, breaking news, a search underway for whomever set fire to 2 ballot drop boxes in 2 different states. So the fires were in Washington state and Oregon and destroyed hundreds of ballots. And authorities at this hour believe the 2 fires are connected. And they've actually identified what they say is a suspect vehicle tied to the incidents. That is according to the latest reporting out of the Associated Press this hour. And it actually comes days after a mailbox fire in the swing state of Arizona damaged multiple ballots. Tonight, the FBI and the DHS are warning of, quote, domestic violent extremists who want to terrorize the voting process, with election workers being potential targets. Out front now, Pennsylvania's Republican Secretary of State Al Schmidt.
If you're thinking about...
I'm sorry to be talking to you under these circumstances, and I know we're going to be talking a lot over these next weeks as this all plays out. I want to start with these fires. How worried are you about them? Are you worried Pennsylvania could be a target of these sort of drop box fires?
Well, I've certainly seen reporting on these incidences. In Pennsylvania, all drop boxes that we have, and again, they are County Board of Elections drop boxes, have video surveillance on them. They are secured into the ground and usually or oftentimes staffed by people to make sure that voters can return their ballot directly to their county in a way that's safe and secure.
So when you hear the FBI and the DHS, first of all, I'm glad to hear about the cameras and the putting it into the ground. I mean, details that we wouldn't necessarily even need to talk about, but I'm glad we are because it's important. But when you hear the FBI and the DHS warning of domestic violent extremists with election workers being potential targets, what are you even able to do to protect election workers, so many of whom, of course, are volunteers coming out to help their community?
And the most important people on Election Day, it's not the Secretary of State, it's not even a county commissioner, it's those friends and neighbors who volunteer essentially for a 14-hour day in Pennsylvania to make sure that when you show up to vote, you can make your voice heard at your local polling place. The Shapiro administration last year set up an election threat task force so that we have clear lines of communication with federal, state, and local partners in law enforcement and election administration to make sure that if any of this ugliness returns that we saw in 2020, everyone knows what everyone else's role is, and we can make sure that if there's any threats targeting our voters or our poll workers or our polling places or our county election staff, that we'll be prepared.
So, Secretary, in Pennsylvania, in Lancaster County, officials there say they stopped suspected fraud in as many as 2,500 voter registration forms. With some of these margins of victory in many states last time, I mean, this could be everything. Those applications had showed inaccurate addresses, mismatched signatures, several forms with the same handwriting. And they say this was what they call a large-scale canvassing operation. That's what was responsible. What more can you tell me about that?
Well, I'm eager to hear the full report from the county. They reached out to us right away. We provided guidance to them for how to handle this sort of situation. It was that they received a significant number of registrations as a group, and some number of them they believe to not be legitimate. So at the end of that investigation, we'll hear from them the degree to which they have found evidence of voter registration fraud. I just want to be clear, voter registration fraud is separate from voter fraud. And while the two can intersect, when you apply to register to vote in Pennsylvania, you're providing a driver's license number or you're providing a social security number. So when someone files a fraudulent voter registration application and it's not legit, it's easy to identify and flag.
All right. So then, do you feel that you know the full extent of this? Is it in other counties? I mean, do you feel like you have a sense of how big it is?
It's really at the county level, and I'm confident that the county will report out to the Pennsylvania Department of State and everyone else the extent to which they have found evidence of this at all.
All right. So I want to ask you about Elon Musk. You know, he's being sued now by the district attorney in Philadelphia over that $1 million a day giveaway that he's giving to registered voters in swing states like yours. They say that it's an unlawful lottery. They want it shut down. Do you think Elon Musk has broken the law, Secretary?
Well, I can certainly see why it would be concerning. The Pennsylvania Department of State is not a law enforcement agency. So I would really leave that up to our partners in law enforcement to make a determination about whether that's lawful or not.
I'm curious when you know, there's been all this talk about whether Pennsylvania will be able to have results on Election Day. I know you have cautioned against expecting that, even though you have machines that will help open some of those mail-in ballots that are designed to open the outer ballot, the inner ballot, all of that. But now you're getting a sense for how many people are voting early. Do you have a better feel every day, Secretary, with how quickly you'll be able to tell the country who won Pennsylvania?
Well, Aaron, every election, whether you have mail ballot voting or not, always comes down to how close an election is before you know who won and who lost. And while our laws, unfortunately, have not changed since 2020, that prevent counties from processing mail ballot envelopes before 7 a.m. on election morning, some things have changed. New equipment at the counties, a lot more experience than they had in 2020, and fewer voters voting by mail. Even though it's widely embraced, during that peak COVID environment, we certainly had a lot more voters choosing to vote by mail. So with those three things, I'm confident that our county partners will process mail ballots expeditiously and with integrity.
All right. Well, Secretary, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.